My name is Phil Trainor. I'm a product manager at Keysight Technologies, and I work in security. And we're going to be looking at ransomware in a kind of different, weird, kind of fun way. Okay, so what are we going to do here? We're going to talk about this basically current landscape, and mostly I really want to focus on the motivation of the creators of this. What I don't want to do is talk about WannaCry. That's something that happened 2 years ago. There's been 4,500 talks about it. But I really want to leave with people. I don't really know the level of understanding of certain people in the group, so I'm going to have a little smattering of everything for everyone. And like I said, I hope it's a lot of fun. Okay, so one thing Keysight does is threat intelligence research, and everything I'll be talking about is based off of that research. And we've been doing this now since 2005 with the Breaking Point Threat Intelligence team. So this is something that we're pretty good at, and hopefully it'll be relevant to what we're talking about. So I have to do this slide, I'm sorry. I'm sure everyone knows this sort of stuff, but I mean, malware is essentially software designed to be remotely controlling someone's machine. It can do anything from force it to mine crypto for them, be part of a botnet, I mean, send emails, or just encrypt the entire drive and wait until it's being paid off to turn off. It's something I should have in the beginning. Cryptors is another thing that we're going to talk a little bit about. They work to obfuscate packages. One of the things that we do very well at Keysight Technologies is show how different exploits and malware can evade security systems. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. Same thing, packers are in the same kind of genre as that, and exploit kits. Okay, so this is something we do a lot of, automated malware analysis, and it's really the way to go. If you're going to do any malware analysis, it's really important to have a very pristine environment, an environment that you can essentially destroy at every time, which is why virtual machines work very well. We use different honeypots, different things like we use Cuckoo, and essentially what we do is we detonate a lot of malware. It's very easy to collect a lot of malware, so we have a lot of experience doing this. I'm going kind of quickly in these beginning ones because I have literally about 50 slides to go through, and we only have an hour. Okay, and we do have a daily malware build. So we'll put out right here, it's about, let me see, in total, about 100 pieces of malware that we put out every day, and they hit different genres. And essentially what our solution does is it'll allow you to run it from point A to point B. If you have an inline security solution attempting to find malware in transit, then it's going to be able to be tested with us. And that's essentially what we do with our malware. We allow people to vet their solutions and see if they're able to be stopped. So here's a piece of malware that I pulled 2 days ago when I first started making this presentation. It was first seen on the 7th of November. Newness is always very critical with malware. Always shows what platform it's on, and also file hashes. File hashes are super important for malware. It's a way a lot of security devices cheat, is they'll have a database of hashes, of unique hashes for files. This is why obfuscation techniques like packers and cryptors really cause problems for that, because, like, for example, if, let's say it breaks into 3 pieces and encrypts it, I mean, that completely blows away the point of having a database of known hashes for it. But let's take a little bit more about this one. So this is a botnet that's a Trojan. It's been around since 2014, and it's a real point-of-sale crimeware concept. And it really targets payment card systems, and it uses Tor, which is, I think, pretty good. It's something that a lot of them do, but not all of them. Mostly worked in the US, and essentially Tor makes it impossible to see the real IP addresses of the destination for the command and control. So I want to spend like 2 minutes talking about Tor. I don't know how familiar everyone here is with Tor. Tor is something that's been around for a long time. And it isn't, a lot of people think that Tor is just for a browser. You can do anything over Tor. It's very easy to have different kinds of services run on Tor, and it's open source, and you can muck it around with it pretty easy. So I said, okay, make it real for me. So I spent 30 seconds, and I said, okay, make me like a Tor service. I'm sorry, the little touch panel is right there, so you can see it better on the other ones. Also had to obfuscate my IP address, but it's within 2 or 3 minutes, you can stand up a Tor server. And what's cool about Tor is you don't need to have a static IP address. You can do it from behind a firewall. So if you really want to run the command and control of your botnet, of your malware service, of your whatever, you can do it from a laptop on your desk right now behind a firewall. You can do it from Starbucks, and it'll work. So you can see right here in the second one, generated my host name and my private key in varlib Tor hidden services host name. And right there I made this onion address Took all of 2 minutes. And if it's up right now if you want to. So I hope you're enjoying Tech Field Day. So I made you guys a dark web server. It took only a couple minutes. So if you're doing malware and you're not using this as your command and control, then you're really not doing a good job with it. And like I said, the malware we talked about 2 seconds ago, this one absolutely uses Tor for its command and control. It's the way to go. Let me see. All right, so essentially what does that get us? What is the net of doing this over Tor opposed to saying a owned machine you have and like wherever? If you look at the Tor circuit on this, you can see how it goes through all the relays. So when I was on my Tor site right there, I pulled up what is my IP address, and it believed I was in Estonia. The real thing you want to do with this is it really makes it difficult. So all the WannaCry people got caught, and they got caught for a number of reasons. One of the main reasons is Bitcoin addresses are public. You can trace the wallets up and down, but also they didn't do a great job of obfuscating their IP addresses. So this is a really good way to do that. I don't know if you guys saw this morning, but APT33 kind of had mud on their face this morning. They got caught doing something kind of silly. So they've developed a bunch of different malware that mostly targets like Saudi Aramco and Qatar. But this morning they got unmasked a bit. So they built a private VPN for doing their ongoing cyber activities. And all 21 exit nodes were identified. And there's a bunch of news articles about this morning. And I laughed at that because, you know, even like having like a public VPN would be better because all your traffic would be mixed in. I mean, you could stand up 21 servers around the world and run like OpenVPN on them to do this, but then it'll be only your traffic. It's kind of pointless. Or just use Tor, which is way better, especially if you're going to be using your malware. Shamoon actually was pretty big a few years ago. In 2016 was when they were able to destroy all those servers and workstations at Aramco. But either way, why not just use a public VPN or Tor? It would make way more sense for your malware campaign. So I don't know, Ron, do a better job. So let's look at another one that is ransomware. Everyone wanted me to talk about ransomware this morning, so we'll talk more about that. So here's another one that is Verilog. It's a ransomware that targets Win32 systems. And it's been around since 2014, but it still causes a lot of havoc now. And essentially what's cool about this one is it's polymorphic. I talked about the ability for malware to evade detection systems. This breaks itself up into 3 different stages, and it puts itself in different files and different places. It really does a good job of evading the host-based systems by doing that. And it goes into lots of different file document types that are fairly normal to have on your desktop. So it's a pretty good job of hiding. Okay, so when I was doing this, it was kind of a free flow thought as to like how the whole thing works. So let's say you are doing ransomware and you want to get paid. Obviously, you're going to want to get paid in crypto. The WannaCry people got paid in crypto, but they all got caught. Bitcoin has what's called a very open ledger. You can trace the interactions of each wallet and every coin's ever touched. You can trace coins all the way back to the beginning. That's why right now newly minted coins are actually going for more than older coins, especially coins that were affiliated with like the dark web and different illegal actions. But also, it's very easy to go online and find all these different Bitcoin ATMs everywhere. And they work with a lot of different cryptocurrencies, and some will buy and some will actually sell also. So if you were to make money doing something illicit with this, it's really not too tough to find one of these and find one that'll sell. But there are some somewhat, I guess, constraints on doing this, but those are easy to get around also. So they want you to put your phone number in there. So I was living in Asia for the last few years, and over there they very strictly regulate who gets a SIM card. Like in Singapore, you need to have a passport to get a SIM card. Not in America, not in a lot of places. You can buy a SIM card with cash. And then if you're using like Mirai, which is a pretty good wallet, this wallet right here goes over Tor. So as long as you're only taking out 3,000 in cash, you can do this with pretty good security in terms of how you're obfuscating, how you're doing it. I mean, Bitcoin laundering is a whole different subject, which I don't think I have time to talk about today, but still is pretty interesting. The best way to do Bitcoin laundering is to use a thing like BISC, the BISC open source network, and to go from Bitcoin to Monero back to Bitcoin. Because once things pass twice with Monero, it's pretty much impossible. Monero does a thing called a token ring, where it essentially it's like 11 people in a room, and I'm going to randomly pass it back and forth. Is a pretty good job of obfuscating it. And also,
I would argue, however, because I've been following that space, that research has proven that Monero transactions can be traced back. I mean, I know that we're not into a cryptocurrency here session, right? So it will be cool if we then slide back to the thing. But I think that there are other cryptocurrencies which allow to do a much more better job than Monero. But that's just an observation, of course.
No, totally. And I mean, nothing is ever secure, but it's just it's a little bit better of an attempt than Bitcoin, which is completely open ledger. But still, using things like BISC and Monero, or do you like Zcash better? Or?
Yeah, Zcash and the derivatives, of course, of that. Yeah. But even so, I mean, it will be broken at some point anyways.
Oh, everything will be, absolutely. But it's still, I mean, if you can do this with, I mean, you can pretty much, as long as you're going under $3,000 a piece, and you can do it 50 times a day. I mean, these ATMs are set up for pretty much for doing that. If you're buying and selling Bitcoin at an ATM, I mean, if you're above board, you'll go on Kraken or one of those other sites. This is for specifically that. And all right, so what's a lot of malware doing in 2019? I really wouldn't say it's doing a ton of ransomware. That was like 2 years ago. Right now, the best thing to do, in my personal opinion, is mine altcoins and all of the, what's the thing called? The Monero-based thing, Kryptonite algorithms are some of the best. Those are still mineable. So a lot of these things are mining Monero and some of the derivatives like Aeon and Graft, Turtle, Loki, all those different ones. They're still mineable and mineable with the CPU. So if you're able to get a system and install malware on it, it's almost a much better scenario for you to do this. So I'm not super worried about ransomware anymore, because ransomware is hard to get paid on, and it's also kind of like a crapshoot. This is almost a better way to do this, where you can say, okay, I'm going to take over this machine, and I'm going to mine with it, with my malware, one of the newer privacy coins. You see here, this is not a very high-end machine. It's actually getting some results. I mean, it's going to make you pennies a day, but if you do a good job with like some of the proxy rigs and put that in Tor, then you can do pretty well. So most of the sites like HashVault, they'll shut you down once you have more than 20 or 30 different machines trying to connect to the service.
I'm just going to cut you here and get back a bit on the topic of what you were discussing here about the malware. Are you seeing people which run crypto miners which are located on the Tor network, and that's the kind of malware that you're detecting?
We're mostly detecting malware that is more focused on crypto mining than on ransomware. Mm-hmm. And we've seen a little bit of people doing this, but the people doing this is the way to go, in my personal opinion.
Good to know.
I wouldn't say that this is the trend right now, but it's the better way to do it. I mean, you can easily put your proxy rig on any port in the dark web, and it's going to obfuscate. Because if you have you have to have a static IP address to do the proxy. You can't do it behind something. So, I mean, I'm not trying to teach people how to get away with committing crimes, but if you were to look out for someone doing something.
Are you sure?
No, we're security professionals. It's important to talk about the things people could do. It's important to talk about the ways people would go about doing something if they were to commit a crime. If this right here were to catch us by surprise, then that's going to be a problem. We'll get away with it. But if it's openly discussed in security forums and public places that say, do you know what would be the way people should do this is this way? All of a sudden law enforcement will look at that. It's more of a known thing. It's more about making information known opposed to having information being completely hidden. But I do see your concern. But yes, that's how a better way to do it is to have your proxy server in the Tor network. So, and that being said, a public service announcement, I highly encourage people never to pay ransomware. ever in any circumstances.
Yes.
Well, I mean, the biggest reason is, I mean, it literally funds vile behavior. We've seen trends of people who have traced ransomware payments to human trafficking and to just really, it's not kids buying bubble gum and 6-packs of beer. It's typically criminal organizations, a lot of them in Eastern Europe and whatnot, but it's really a bad thing. You're better off losing your data, in my personal opinion. Furthermore, if you're going to prevent ransomware, you should, one, have a disaster recovery plan. If you don't have a disaster recovery plan, then you're pretty much waiting for something bad to happen. You should have a very good backup of all your critical data. It should be air-gapped in a way, because some of these different, the one we previously saw, the previous malware, could propagate through cloud and through internal apps. So have a good backup mechanism, have disaster recovery mechanism, but also implements preventative measures. And preventative measures are some of the easiest things that you can do, and they're worth, I mean, they say ounce of prevention, pound of cure. This is some very simple things to do. So
I don't know that I would agree with that sentiment. I mean, people have been saying back up your data and have a disaster recovery plan since the invention of computing, and yet we see time and time again that those things are not necessarily easy things to
I wasn't
accomplish.
saying those are easy. I was saying just do these. I have different preventative measures I'm going to talk about now that are way easier.
So that last line's the easy part.
Yeah, that's
Got
the
it.
easy part. The first two are not. The first two are expensive.
Yeah.
I'd argue they're not hard. They're expensive. Having like, I want to have a really good. Well, Dell will come over with their EMC group, and they'll be like, "We'll totally do that for millions of dollars. Don't worry about it." So,
But Keysight will come in for free.
Oh, look at that.
I'm not getting into. I'm an engineer. I'm not a salesperson. I'm just saying that this is a lot. The number 3 one is a lot easier to do.
I would still say backing up critical data, it's not a hardware problem, it's a where's the data problem. And so
Yeah.
your critical data, when you talk about ransomware, it's not typically storage arrays that are getting encrypted as laptops, and that's the problem. Like, the problem is the fact that the data actually lives there, and we don't know that it lives there, and all of a sudden we don't have it.
It's not just the laptop, right? Because if you can do side escalation. If you get into the laptop of
yeah.
an admin, and you're able to get the credentials in RAM, then you
can encrypt absolutely everything, and I agree with
things
that.
can go wrong.
It's really nothing to do with the data at the point anyways. It's what gets encrypted. Can you restore from a known good backup?
Yeah.
And all of that is not simple to do. It's actually very hard to do.
Yep.
And so it's kind of not trivial. If I'm a hospital and I get ransomware, which has happened tons of times, and I have no IT ability for any of the things that rely on IT, which is patient related and sometimes is life or death related, sometimes the best thing to do is to pay the ransom and get going if you don't have a good backup to restore from. You got to do what you got to do to keep people alive.
But that's a different case. If we're talking about a hospital and people keeping people alive, but if you're like whatever organization, I mean, before what I was saying is you have to take a moment, understand that people you are giving money to are people who do horrible things in society, and you're funding a criminal organization. But if you have, like, a lot of these medical machines, like, they're run by older software, and it's a big problem. And so I understand people saying, like, hey, we need to pay this in a hospital because there are lives at stake. It's a different thing than saying that, oh, our social media company really needs to get back online. But, all right, so we do a lot of collection inside of honeypots. And this is one of our honeypots is doing pretty much just malware gathering for us. And it's pretty much focused largely on exploitive attacks and phishing and malware. And it's getting, it's about 188,000 events I had yesterday. So this is a constant thing. So really, I guess the moral of that is bots are going at a constant rate, trying to find every possible flaw. Like even when like other exploitive attacks, like when Experian or Equifax got hacked not that long ago, it was a very simple mistake. And the person who got caught doing that probably noticed that they were doing a scan and something was vulnerable. But the preventative measures I was talking about that are fairly easy is that I mentioned before that we have a solution that will essentially take our 100 different malware scenarios every day, do all sorts of weird obfuscation with it, and just run it from point A to point B and see if whatever you have in line, whatever vendors you put in line, whatever you're spending a lot of money on for a security tool, is actually doing anything and looking at it correctly. So that's really the solution, one of the solutions that we have that's a very good job for it. And our daily malware is really good. It's all real. It'll all work. So saying to yourself, okay, am I dependent on endpoint security is an answer that most people can't give. They'll say, all right, we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on each piece of equipment in our network to stop things like this. What are we getting for our money? Is it actually doing anything? We can tell you definitively yes or no. And if it's doing something, is it doing it completely? Is it blocking just stages of it? Is it actually blocking the whole scenario? This is something that we can do a very good job of telling you how effective it is going from point A to point B. Same thing, we're really good at evasive techniques. This is an older slide, not necessarily malware, but we found that when even very simplistic evasive techniques are taken, it does a great job at baffling even very expensive equipment. Whenever evasive techniques are done, essentially you look for bad signatures and bad mechanisms for looking for something. And that's what a lot of the malware is doing now, is employing fairly polymorphic and sophisticated mechanisms for doing this, breaking itself up into multiple pieces, encrypting itself, compressing itself, just changing itself slightly. So doing these kind of things in a testing environment is critical, because if you don't, then in a nutshell, you have no idea how well things work. Same thing, we have about 40,000 live attacks also. And I mean, malware isn't always sent via a file. That's kind of like, a lot of people believe that, like, oh, this PDF, I shouldn't open it. This file, I shouldn't open it. But like, I mean, WannaCry was MS-17010. It was a SMB attack that shadow brokers stole from our own government and used in order to send this. I mean, you should never have port 445 open in a large scale environment, but internal on a LAN, it actually caused a lot of problems. So piggybacking malware on a viable exploit is something that has been done and will be done again. Same thing, if you're spending a fortune on inline security solutions, how well can they block a attack going from untrust into trust? Is this something that you can get your money's worth out of? We have a whole bunch of things called quick tests, and quick tests are cool because it just allows you to say, okay, run this suite all the way through. Tell me how well we do. It's really not too complicated to set up. And we have a whole bunch of malware and malware with evasion techniques for this. Have it run every hour. It works on virtual machines, it works on physical, works in the cloud. It's a pretty simple concept, and it does a good job with all of our various stuff. And also, we're able to grade you on it, which is basically when it comes to malware, you want to block all of it. But it does, the second thing that's kind of cool is it'll put in all the background traffic that'll be there as well. So you're not finding something in a vacuum. That actually wouldn't be very difficult. If every single packet traversing a network was malicious, then it'd be like, well, everything's malicious. So we'll tell you the impact of an actual exploit against a system, but not just that, but how does this impact the real users? If you're trying to send your email and do your job and do stuff, if your security solution is breaking everything going through, I mean, my opinion of security solutions is almost the Hippocratic Oath, like first do no harm to my network. And once you've gotten to that point, then you can start doing some sort of net gain by having it block actual malicious events. But if you're blocking real users doing stuff, then that's a problem. Another solution we have, this is kind of fun. It's called Threat Armor. This has 4.3 billion rules in it, but it's just IP addresses. It's IP addresses that we've seen in the last 24 hours that have been exclusively running phishing campaigns or launching malware or scanning. If I go back to this one right here, let me see. Sorry, I'm going back more than I thought. You can see, so these are real IP addresses from a couple of days ago. Like, I had 28,000 attacks from 9630.84138 and 27,000 attacks from these. They're mostly MSSQL attacks. But these IP addresses are just spitting this stuff out. I mean, they really have no place in your network. A lot of IP addresses belong to organizations, telecoms, places that have legitimate purpose on your network. But I'd say a couple % of the entire internet is completely comprised of IP addresses that are exclusively malicious. And this changes on a very rapid basis. Someone will typically get owned, and they'll become a tool of whoever is trying to exploit further. And knowing about this is a really important thing. So we have an inline blocking solution that does not go up the stack, doesn't look at layer 7, doesn't try to determine if there's malware inside of the packets or an exploit. We just have definitive information that's updated every 5 minutes to the box that says, hey, we have seen this IP address doing nothing but garbage over the last 24 hours.
Okay, so I want to take a timeout.
Sure.
So that's one of your products, right?
Yep.
Can we go back to slide? Thanks. So this sits on my network in my data center, right? And so it sits on the front and it just reads the IP addresses in, and if it gets does it have a rule match? Like, how does this work? It has a rule matching of
Transparent inline?
yeah.
So we can do out-of-band and in-band inline, but we have a bypass built into it. So essentially, yeah, we have it's based off a hash, but we have an updating black-white list on IP addresses we've seen events in. I mean, we typically automatically whitelist the Alexa 10,000 and a bunch of things like that, but a lot of IP addresses from like Eastern Europe and actually Venezuela has been pretty interesting lately, and places like that.
And how do you get those, and how do they get pushed down to this box? Do you guys have like do you guys collect them here, or like how do you do that intelligence?
Oh, I've got a whole bunch of slides on that.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
And is this V6 or V6 or just
We
V4?
haven't seen too much IPv6 anything.
Well, it says every IP address on the internet, so.
Then that's a misnomer. I should have wrote just every IPv4 address. I'm sorry. But IPv6, we're really not seeing that much maliciousness for on that. I mean, IPv4 is still pretty cluttered, but
It's the same reason why Windows is targeted over Mac or other things. It's just density. But yeah, I agree. If you're going to put that on the slide,
sorry. I should be factually correct.
yes,
We're in the business of being factually
accuracy matters.
correct. It does. I'm sorry about that.
Words mean things.
Let me go forward 3 slides and show you how we collect data. Or let me just do these first, though. It'll take 2 minutes. All right, so on our screen, we have like a little map, and the map will show like kind of real time where we're seeing things from. And you're able to go in and say, okay, what are my blocked lists? What are my allowed lists, bottom countries? But also from like a technologist, I have so much fun kind of looking at this, because I'll be like on our network and be like, why are we talking to like Macau or Bolivia? Like, we really don't do business there. I don't see why a customer would be there from that. So it's always kind of interesting. And we'll show things like, okay, here is malware. And on this one right here, it actually comes from the US. And we'll give a lot of links to this. We call this a rap sheet. And in a rap sheet, we'll have basically enough information to get yourself into a lot of trouble if you really wanted to play around with it. Like if you wanted to like get the file from it, you could totally do that. So it's kind of cool, and we really do believe in proof that way, and that's how we do our. Well, here's another Trojan we got. This one was actually interesting. So this was from a financial institution, and this was a egress TCP connection. So a laptop from someone whose job is to manage people's money in the state of California at 3 o'clock in the morning was doing a TCP socket on a port to an IP address that was only hosting this in Ukraine. So we didn't do any deep packet inspection. All we knew is we have about 1,200 honeypots. We do scanning. It's actually all starting on this one. So how do we create this? We do some source feeds, we do some scanning, but a lot of it is we have about 1,200 honeypots that are all over the world. And we look for garbage, people doing current garbage, and it's...
I can ask a small question. You're tracking on IP address, but we have a lot of IP addresses which is doing virtual hosting. There might be legitimate sites stacked on top of a virtual IP address like that. Are you doing a second phase of check then, once you say, oh, are you just blocking the IP address?
So essentially we have really 2 layers of things for that.
Yep.
First one is if you are like Alexa 10,000 or something like that, and that's your IP address, we're not going to touch you.
Right.
But also a thing called gray list. And gray list does with kind of that multi-tenancy type scenario
Yep.
where there are multiples in there. So a gray list will delineate between those. But it also depends on what we find in there as well. I mean, if it seems to be like one or two machines doing something little, then that's really not going to get a rap sheet.
Right.
What we're really looking for is, like, if anyone's stared at Splunk, Splunk is just filled with tons and wait, does Cisco own ArcSight? Should I not talk about Splunk?
Yeah.
All right.
No. So I think what you're trying to say there is that you would put this box to filter out 96%, 99% of the trash noise.
Yeah.
There's no point in putting all of this stuff into Splunk because there's no signal in that.
Yeah.
What you really want to do is say these IP addresses are 100% trash.
Pretty much.
So just block them ahead of where I start to log into some seam or before I hit a more deep inspection system. So there's a couple of things there. One is I reduce the cost of my Splunk because, wow, Splunk. Whew,
They pay for it by what?
right? And the second one is if you've got deep inspection security engines doing deep scanning like DNS exfiltration and stuff like that, they're expensive too. So if you can take off the load, and if you're paying per load, then all of a sudden you've changed the equation for cost of security. Is that a viable use case?
That is absolutely 100% correct, but I'd make 1/3 addendum to it. Your time, her time, and his time, everyone's time is a huge cost.
Right.
And if I could have someone working in a SOC not spend 2 hours looking at, but spend those 2 hours doing something more productive,
Right.
that's another huge.
So this
cost
would be, so just to position this in my mind, because I'm getting all the security stuff because I do this all the time, or used to. Really, this is about a particular unique solution in the sense that I'd put this in front of my firewall. There's no point in firewalling this traffic because it's just utter trash, in or out, by the way. And if you haven't got a default-free network, you kind of need something like this. So you would put it, say, in front of your firewall, and it would just cut all of this rubbish out so your firewall doesn't see it, thereby cutting the cost of your firewall, of your threat detection, the amount of inspections you have to have, and all that sort of stuff. Is that reasonable?
It's very true. Actually, when we first deploy it at a customer, the way we usually do it is we put it behind the firewall. And we say, everything hitting this should be cool.
Right.
There should be, or it's not worth anything.
Right.
And we usually end up moving it in front. But it's a different kind of thing. I mean, like a next-gen firewall made by whatever company, they're focused on layer 7. And layer 7 rules are expensive resource-wise. This is a layer 3 rule. All the value in it is our updates and our infrastructure we spend. Yeah.
No, there is substantial cost savings to be made here, right?
Very much.
So there is a question about how much your product costs, of course, but let's put that aside for the moment and pretend that it's real. You can save a lot of money in terms of, SIEM, IDSs, content scanning licenses, capacity licenses on your firewall,
Totally.
as well as actually in bringing in a defense in depth as well. I like the exfiltration part completely because a lot of, especially in some countries, they have default in their networks and they don't actually filter the outbound very well.
Well, also, outbound is really hard to filter because most outbound is asymmetrically encrypted at the endpoint.
Yes.
So they can't even look at it. And if you do,
So blocking by IP, so you're not blocking by DNS name, you're not scanning by SNI, you're not doing content scanning and payload inspection. You're just saying this is a big list of known bad IP addresses. We're going to drop it before anything else happens because we are 100%. You're not even like 99% certain, 99.9. You're just saying these are
100%.
This is it, right? And that's the function of this device, reasonably.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, I got it.
Been around for a while, actually. This was one of the last inventions of, I'm sure you've heard the name Dennis Cox. He created tipping points and breaking points.
Yep.
This was, I think he's racing Ferraris now, but this is one of the things that he created before he went on to do that.
And I guess the second step is this is what you're pitching out here then is you're building your own threat intelligence. You're not so a lot of these security companies these days sort of go and buy a threat intelligence feed for somewhere else. So what we're now talking about is how you build your threat intelligence to know which IP addresses to block.
That's correct.
Okay, great.
I mean, our threat intelligence team right now, it's one of our biggest engineering orgs at Keysight.
Yep.
But the team's from 2005, from the original Breaking Point team, with a lot of the Metasploit original members and whatnot. So they're not there anymore, obviously, but we've been doing this now for 15 years. So we're pretty good at it, I think.
Okay.
But like also another thing is the daily check. All of these rap sheets, all of these rules have a 24-hour timer. And if we don't continually see an event after 24 hours, then it's back on the whitelist. Another thing we do with this solution, which I've had a lot of interest in recently, is not even put it in line, just put it out of band and have it be probed to basically assess the risk. So let's say you're a carrier and you have a lot of people doing a lot of different things on the back of a network, and you want to assess the risk of it. How many people are talking to botnets? How many people are talking to malware sites? How many phishing sites are going this network? So from a higher level, from like a government level or a service provider level, that's something that people have said, you know what, I actually would like to have a kind of a risk picture of what people are doing on this network without being in line, without blocking, just to have that data. So like say you're a government network and you're like, okay, like we're very interested to know if anyone here is talking to what you believe is a botnet or what you believe is a malware site. These are things that are critical interest to us. But what we don't want to do is sit in line and block things. It's more of an informational thing. So in line and out of band, we've seen use cases for both. So I did a little proof of concept on a rap sheet, which I thought would be a little fun. Because a lot of people say, like, does it actually work? Can you prove to me that this is a thing? So here's one for, I don't know why I did this here because other IP addresses I just gave you, but these IP addresses I nixed out. So this is 185.165.2.blah. So we have a rap sheet for this one, and it was a Mirai command and control server. So I went onto my Tor browser inside of a VM that I could just destroy afterwards, and I just did a wget, and I grabbed the file type from it. And just for the fun of it, I mean, I like third-party tools also. So just to do this more quickly than taking out like GDB or IDA and tearing it apart, because to be honest, I'm really not very good at doing that. Just stuffed it in VirusTotal and uploaded a file that I did. It was found to be exactly Mirai. I really should cross out some of these things. They use very bad language.
I'm a bit lost here. We've been talking a lot about, you know, how you detect, you do all of these things, but the part I'm missing for now, for the past, I don't know how long the presentation has been running, is how Ixia or Keysight actually is helping combat malware campaigns. Okay. I don't know if it's going to take 5 minutes or half an hour to get there, but I'd like to get to that point, if you don't mind.
Sure, no problem. So I guess I'm getting a little bit long in my explanations. So there are several ways we do it. Just to do it at a very high level, with this solution right here, this hardware solution, so I get back here a bit, I can definitively test and send malware between zones and tell you if your solutions are able to block it. I can do a lot of great techniques for evasion and say, if I send malware from untrust into your trust zone, will your solutions block it? Definitively yes or no. And you can run this every hour, and we have about 100 new pieces of malware every day we introduce into the system. That's one. The whole premise of this right here, and I got off on a little bit of a tangent, is this right here. This focuses on, let me find, this one say malware right here. So this one here. This right here is a server that is exclusively serving up malware. It is a command and control server or the hosting server with the actual malware package on it. So we will block these rogue sites. This one appears to be actually in the US, but the other one I showed.
So, sorry to interrupt again. One thing you had on the slide you were showing about how you're solving that was that you apply some policies. So what are these policies? What are the types of policies that you can apply within your product?
On this one right here?
No, not that slide. The one you were showing, you had the diagram and you were showing the architecture of how I don't know, you have too many slides, man.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that one, yeah. So you say the only way is to ensure security policies are being applied correctly. So what policies and how do you apply them correctly?
Okay, so I'm trying to be a little bit vendor agnostic. I don't want to talk about vendors too much, especially considering we're at Cisco's campus. But so I will create the events. And let's say you purchased right here, let's say you purchased a solution from a company down the street that starts with NS, and they basically create virtual machines inside the NS product in order to detonate events they've never seen before. How do you know it works? How do you know it does anything? It's going to cost you a lot of money. Same thing with, I mean, a lot of these solutions have built-in, like one company has a thing called Wildfire that they use to create virtual machines inside. Essentially, these are very expensive solutions. They're very high-end solutions, and people are paying a lot of money for them. And they'll have a screen that says, we block against the malware I talked about earlier. And taking people's word for it is not the business I'm in. I like to trust but verify. And
okay, I don't understand where you're going with this. I'm really sorry, because I think we're asking like really directly. So with this slide, where are the security policies coming from and how are they being applied correctly? And so what you're saying is before I buy something, I should get your solution and put it on my network between whatever I'm testing out and make sure it works?
Right. Does the solution come in during the POC phase of every security solution that you're trying to, or do you have like a database of?
Maybe if I take it even to a further point is, okay, what kind of security policies do we have and where do they apply? Do they apply just on your hardware or competition?
What do you do?
Yeah, exactly.
Tell us what you do, because I understand malware, and I'm not a networking person. But I understand malware. I understand threats. I understand a lot of stuff, and I have a lot of other questions I don't even want to get to yet about how the little things you've told us. How does your product work? What's it doing?
Okay, so I'll stop trying to be political. I'll just say, I mean, we're at a customer site, so I'll say, all right, you bought SourceFire. SourceFire blocks malware. You go and you click the policies within SourceFire and say, I'm concerned about malware coming in over Outlook and over HTTP and over all these different scenarios. I want you to inspect the traffic coming in from this zone for malware. And this is going to be a box that's going to cost you about $100,000. And it's going to get you about 10 to 50 gigs for this. You're going to buy a bunch of these. And my box is going to send the malware it purports to block through it in production, typically not just before you buy it, but always, constantly. And it'll tell you if those policies that you're spending a lot of money for in a SourceFire, Palo Alto, FireEye, Fortinet, whomever, these are all, they're typical deployments, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. This box right here will tell you if it can actually block something, or you bought something that doesn't do anything.
Oh, this is the tester. So
The test box, yeah.
Ixia is a test generator.
Okay.
So what you can now do is fire the malware session, the malware tools that we saw before. You can now fire them at a firewall to see if it'll trigger,
Okay.
right? And then you can fire it at 100 megabits per second, a gigabit per second, tens of gigabits per second, and then see if the firewall collapses in a disgusting pile, which is really entertaining, right? Because I've done this sort of testing before, and we spent just over £3 million on a pair of firewalls that were rated to go at a certain speed. And when we put an Ixia on them, a breaking point, we found that they collapsed at 250 megs instead of 10 gigs. They just can't do things. And so what we're doing here is testing the breaking point of products. And in this case, he's feeding the malware rules that you saw before into the firewall.
Gotcha. So who's the customer for this then? Do you buy this as you're buying another product?
I mean, lots of people. I mean, let's say that you are a service provider, or you are an enterprise, or anybody. I mean, let's just say that you are Facebook or whomever.
If you're the one that I've used is I've been in companies where they're guaranteeing a firewall security service that operates at 5 gigabits per second. And so normally what they do is they go to vendor whatever and they buy a firewall who makes very big promises like a Checkpoint or a SourceFire or a Palo, right? And then what you do is when you throw 5 gigabits of traffic at it, you find it just dies. It just falls down.
Right.
Now, if you've given an SLA to a customer at 5 gigabits per second,
You're done.
Right, this is a very niche product and specialist in a way that, in the sense that, or if you're a customer, so normally what most of us do is we just go, that looks about right. Will it handle the load? Don't know, we'll find out the hard way.
Right.
This is a tool that lets you find out the easy way, provided you're willing and capable to have the resources to put this in place. You can build up the policies that you're going to test and to validate with, and when you've got that,
You can keep your SLAs. You know that you can charge this much for.
you can go back to the executives and say, I absolutely can guarantee you that this is the SLA for this particular functionality around the thing. So this is like the ultimate proof of concept.
Okay.
Security is just like one use case. So I used Breaking Point before Ixia acquired it to deal with the payment gateway. That we had a whole bunch of stuff in line that the traffic had to flow through.
Yeah, the
We
breaking
beat
point
it to death with the
universal
Breaking Point box, and then found out, oh, look, we got to acquire more sessions in the Apache instance, or this thing falls over after 100 sessions. Oops.
Yeah,
Or whatever it was.
I've used the breaking point to, we had a cluster which had 30 web servers in it. And the developers promised that it was going to handle 5 gigabits per second of traffic behind the 5 gigabits per second firewalls.
You know, this is all about security. You're beating your security infrastructure to death to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. That's the whole premise of this, right?
Under load.
Yep, and also thank you for using before the acquisition. I was part of Breaking Point fairly early on. Thank you.
I had a lot of fun with that stuff.
Good.
I used to break the firewalls and then get the vendors in and say, why does your product perform so badly? And they would just sit there and go like,
Sounds like fun.
Go, look, have you ever tested this? And they go, So what we really found out, just an interesting side story, I hope it's okay. We used to fire this stuff at firewalls, and when we found out that most firewalls, 9 out of 10 firewalls, when they get to load, they just stop and go shut. And most of them would fail dead. So they'd be powered up, but dead. So that is not what you want. At least what you want is for it to degrade and then stop. But what most of them would do is just shut and go locked up. And that is not a firewall that you want to buy when you're running a 24/7, 365 operation. And we ended up choosing the firewall because they were all equally bad, because none of them were ever tested at load. We found out there was one that just used to get slower and slower and slower, and then it would reboot. And that was the best we could get. So.
And you throw a whole nother wrench into this when you're saying, okay, let's do polymorphic malware that breaks up into 3 pieces and sends them at different times, and then let's do compression and encryption with it. So yeah, that's essentially what this will do. Did I answer your question? Or did this gentleman answer your question?
That was Ethan that answered the question.
You both answered it. I mean, better than I did.
I think it's what we're more interested in is what do your products actually do. So I kind of feel like this sounds like a very point product. Have you told us about other ones and we kind of missed it because you were trying to skip around different names?
This one right here, the one that has every IP address in the world, Breaking Point, sorry.
Okay, so that's a product as well.
Is a product as well. And we do have kernel knowledge of malware sites and phishing sites at this moment. And if there's the example I had over here that was sorry, I do have a lot of slides. This one right here, this is a malware site that was based in Ukraine that a egress TCP connection was making from a customer site because they were owned by the malware and they didn't even know. And inline security solutions they had load balance next-gen firewalls, and it was letting it go right through the system because it didn't care about an outbound encrypted TCP port 443 connection. They couldn't look inside it, and they said, well, it's an outbound TLS 1.2 connection on 443. It's a website. It's fine. It was in Ukraine, and this is a machine that had been owned for a while, and they didn't know. So that's one of our solutions for that, and this is our rap sheet stuff, and I've got one more solution to talk about this, and I did a little proof of concept with the rap sheet to prove it was correct. So we have another concept we have, let me go over to right here. This is called a visibility solution. It's called a network packet broker. And these are pretty cool because what you can do with these is you can load balance firewalls. So let's say that you have that problem where the firewalls you have, after you test it, will not cut it. You can take a second, a third firewall and say, okay, load balance all my traffic inline on these solutions. That way you can build in a little bit better redundancy and high availability. But also we have a thing called bypass. So if it falls over completely, it just yanks out of the network because failing open is better than completely cutting everything off. So this is something to utilize your tools a little bit better. Also will copy traffic. So if you want to port it out to something else, it's more of a facilitator for your expensive tools. And it has intelligence in it, which is kind of cool. And if you want to, it'll do examinations of the traffic. And from a malware standpoint, if, like, for example, someone's doing TCP stratum, and if you're seeing TCP stratum on your network, you can kind of assume either one of your employees is mining with your network or you're hosting malware right now that's doing that. And we'll even geolocate it for you, which is kind of cool. So you can say, okay, we're doing geolocation. We'll tell you. Also, people love the operating system stuff. A lot of shops we work with are very rigid about what can be on their network. They'll be like, we are a Windows 10 shop, and that's it. It's no BYOD. So another aspect of it, but its primary use is this. Let's say you have SourceFire, and you've graded SourceFire for the example that you want to do at 9 gig or 8 gig, and you need to go up to 40. Be like, okay, I want to buy 5. I want to load balance all 5 of them, so I have some headroom. And if the traffic causes one to fall over, yank it out of the network real quick. And that's essentially what a packet broker does. And we have some cool stuff for like, okay, I'd like to actually see, I like to see for my network, everyone is talking on Outlook, or everyone is talking on YouTube. I would get a little bit more information of that. Make a copy of these packets. If I see TCP stratum, grab me a copy of that packet so I can go harass the person sitting over at whatever IP address is correlated to whatever desk. But
Is this, you said packet broker a second ago, so do we skip out from breaking point and we're now talking about the Inui acquisition?
yes, yep.
Okay.
And this is the current iteration. One of the things that Ixia does very well, and same thing with the Inui and Keysight, is we make hardware-infused products. So essentially, this is a lot of FPGAs. And if you do this in FPGA, and you can get down to the nanosecond level packet switching for making these decisions. If you do it in software, then you're going to be in the milliseconds probably. So we do a lot of engineering work in this to have a whole bunch of FPGAs making these level decisions. So it's pretty cool in that fact.
And now it seems there's some integration across the different lines as well, because they used to be very, very standalone.
Totally.
And it looks like the interface has been updated on this. And the last time I saw this, the interface, if you go ahead some number of slides, yeah, that is not what that looked like at all, not all that long ago.
Oh, totally, yeah. This is called AppStack now. We've taken the group that I work with, the Application Threat Intelligence group, and we put that into the Inui acquisition.
Yeah.
We actually put a network processor. Before, they would never have this. This box does have a network processor, same as with the Breaking Point box. And it does the inverse of the rules. Breaking Point makes attacks and apps and stuff, but this kind of takes them apart.
Well, that's kind of a big deal what you've done there, because of the nature of the packet filtering that you can do that is tied back to layer 7 intelligence, effectively.
Totally. Now it's up to geolocation, apps, operating system, or relevant to malware, TCP stratum.
This is obviously different than the SolarWinds project that's called AppStack, right?
Yeah, completely.
Yes.
I'm just saying, it's called the same. It's
I'm not a lawyer, so I
Same
don't
thing.
know
Yeah,
about
no,
that.
not related.
Yeah, but yeah, this is another networking solution for that security cluster that you have at the edge of the network.
get it.
Yeah, and this is packet brokers are where you take a packet and then you choose what you want to do. Do you want to copy it? Do you want to send it out to 5 more places? Do you want to tap? Do you want to munge and filter and then send? You know, there's a whole bunch of really weird things that you can do with this. They're mega fun.
Cool. Well, I've got about 5 minutes left. Any questions? Other than, are we helping people commit crimes? You caught me for a second there. I was like, wait, no.
So in this scenario where you've detected something really interesting, you're going to turn it into an actionable event for me if I'm in SecOps. What am I going to do? I'm going to route this off to something. And
I'd say the best way to do this is to make you can make a Splunk event with this and send it out to NetFlow or syslog or whatever you want to. So that's the best way to do it, in my opinion, is you can make a rule that says if I see TCP stratum, then I would like to have a syslog event take place. Or if I see...
so I'm not limited to simply a packet copy. You know, if I get a match, I've got a range of events that I can kick off now that are whatever I want them to based on the other tooling I already own.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And another cool thing that we did with this is how we put the threat armor, the solution that has a rule for every IP address on the internet. This is how we put it behind the firewall and then in front of the firewall, never unplugging it. So the customer that had this, they had next-gen firewalls, and they actually had them load balance with this. And we just plugged the threat armor into this, and they redrew the lines and said, okay, this is now behind the firewall. Every packet that traverses my firewall then traverses this. And we went to lunch and said, if we get any events, then we'll look at them. If not, then you can take it with you. And we saw a whole bunch of weird stuff that was really compelling. And after a few days of analyzing the events, they said, okay, now move it in front of the firewalls. It was all plugged in this. Just redrew the lines in the GUI, and it didn't involve basically any recabling. And as anyone who works in labs, once the larger your lab is, recabling things, it becomes exponentially crazier in terms of a ticket requisition to do any kind of cabling. So this solves a lot of problems. It also makes it a lot cleaner. There's no one person who owns the knowledge or has a back of the napkin drawing of what they did. It's a lot easier to look with and share.
With that chassis, I'm looking at a bunch of optic slots. What kind of optics can I put in there, up to what speeds, let's say, and then what kind of throughput can the chassis actually support?
Oh, we've got a bunch of these. So this is just the Vision 1. These right here are all 10s, and you have 2 40s on the side, but we have cards that do up to 100. So we have, it's data center oriented, so we'll do 25, 40, 50, 100, and pretty soon 400.
And the ASIC can actually filter all ports at 100 and give you the data, or is there some limit to that?
On layer 3 and 4 rules, we can do that at line rates. But once you go up to layer 7, then we have a thing called advanced feature module cards. You got to buy more of the cards. Each feature module cards can do, I believe, in the vicinity of like 40-ish gigs.
So there's some scale out you need to consider depending on how much traffic you're trying to process and filter.
Yeah, but also, I mean, if you do it right, you don't really need to be as fast as that, because typically people whittle things down with the layer 3 and 4 rules and say, okay, I'm only really interested in these kind of scenarios.
Okay.
And you can say, okay, filter it down to these and then push it to the advanced feature module card, because you don't want to just send everything to the advanced feature card. You're better off saying, you know, if it's not coming from this data center, if it's not coming from here, and it's not these ports, then I really don't think is applicable to this.
So you cut down on a 5-tuple match, and that all happens at line rate, and then whatever's left. Yeah, okay.
So with the threat armor that only cares about layer 3, I use one of these things to take in 1.2 terabit of traffic and load balance it over like 6 threat armors. Because, I mean, the average packet size was somewhere around 800 bytes, but I mean, the IP header is, what, 44 bytes? We're able to cut it down about 5%. So people said, oh, I'm going to need like 200 threat armors to do this. I'm like, no, you just need one of these.
Okay.
Any other questions? I know we have lunch coming too.
Yeah. I think we've covered most of them. We asked a lot of questions as we were going along.
That was fun. I liked that. It was more interactive. And also, some of the questions were like really challenging. Usually people don't ask questions. I spent the last 4 years in Asia where people do not ask questions.
Yes.
We're all an embittered, cynical group, so we ask questions.
I like that. It's great. Well, it's impolite over there. Over here, people are like, what about this?
Again, I'm not a networking guy. But this is security.
This has been the caveat all week. I'm not a networking guy. Yes.
But I saw a very, very confusing number of interfaces. I mean, there are different products, and but you're bringing all of them to the market. Why aren't you trying to make them more, look the same at least, same interface? Are they part of acquisitions? Are they part of? Why are so different? Why are they operate so differently? I mean.
Sure. I mean, it's a very valid question. And I guess the answer to that is yes, they are acquisitions. I was part of Breaking Point. Breaking Point is now part of Keysight. And Nui is now part of Keysight. So they are acquisitions, but also they have very different focuses. I mean, this solution right here is meant for being in a data center. And as I talked about earlier, the test tools are very niche product also. If you're going to test a firewall, then you have to be, it's one of those things where you either absolutely need to do it or you don't. They're very different products, and having like right now we're at Cisco. Cisco does an amazing job of bringing everything into one solution, but we're still a little bit different in that case because our products are very, very different. I mean, a traffic generator to beat up a firewall, and then this inline device are just such different products, but they can both be used to stop malware and stop ransomware, which is the theme that we're trying to stick to.